How should Christians engage in politics? And what approach should we take? Well, in this video, we're going to react to a recent piece by Dr. Gavin Ortlund from Truth Unites, which was titled Before Dunking on Tim Keller, Consider This, which dives into the idea of the third way. Well, I've got something for you to consider as well. I don't censor guests on this channel, and I want them to speak freely, even if it offends some people. So consider this a friendly trigger warning. While Canon Creed usually focuses on rigorous theological issues, today's going to be a little bit different. This is going to be more of a relaxed, unfiltered conversation. Two friends talking honestly about the third way approach to Christianity and culture. And we're going to react to Gavin's video and share some unfiltered thoughts, the same way we would if we were sitting on my guest's back porch, smoking cigars and sipping bourbon. And I keep saying we, that's because joining me to discuss is my friend Doug TenNapel. Doug is the creator of Earthworm Jim, as well as the animated series Cat Scratch on Nickelodeon, and is a longtime animator, cartoonist, video game designer, and YouTuber. And currently, he does political media analysis on the Doug in Exile YouTube channel. What many may not know is that Doug walked away from the mainstream entertainment industry when he could no longer keep his Christian convictions under a bushel, which is to say that his faith has cost him a lot, which is one of the many reasons that I value his perspective on how Christians should engage in the public square, even if he's raw and brutally honest. So let's examine third wayism from a different angle, and ask whether it truly helps the church speak clearly in our cultural moment. All right, man, let's get into this. First, Gavin is going to lay out his thesis and goal of the video.
How Christians relate to politics and culture war right now is a huge issue. Lots of people are contrasting Tim Keller's approach, sometimes called the third way approach, with more bold approaches like Charlie Kirk's approach. That's been one construct you see. By the way, if you're going to do that, please take into account differences of calling and context. Tim Keller is a pastor in New York City, was a pastor and church planter. Charlie Kirk is more of a political and cultural and religious commentator doing debates on university campuses. He talks about theology as well, but he's got a different calling. You know, it's like if you're going to compare these two people, it's like saying, Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan, look at them both playing golf. Wow, Tiger Woods is so much better. And you don't mention, actually Michael Jordan wasn't mainly a golf player. He was in the NBA. He was a basketball player. That was his main thing. However, in this video, what I want to do is assume that you, the viewer, agree with the criticism of third way that is very popular right now. I mean, third way is, it's in tough days right now. And you think this is it's just your patience is totally done. That's the sense I get from people, is we just need to kill this, bury it, leave it behind, and even just mock it on the way as we're walking away from the grave. Just nothing but contempt. That's what you get from some quarters. Others not that extreme. I try not to make the extremes representative of everybody, but there's real energy against this right now. I'm trying to understand that. But let me say this in this video. I'm going to assume it's correct, and I'm going to make 3 appeals for, if you're persuaded of that, could I appeal to you to do this as you're leaving third wayism dead in the gutter? Can you please hear these 3 appeals? And the spirit of this is, I think Christians can actually sometimes be of good faith and have disagreements about these questions, and how we conduct our disagreements matters for the sake of the kingdom of God. So hear me out, that, even if we disagree, we can still maybe think about how we might, and I'll listen to your appeals too in the comments, or if people make response videos,
Okay, so this video, he said, is geared toward us, basically. I'm not necessarily in the extreme that he mentioned, because I don't know exactly what he means or what he's seen. But would you say you're in the camp that thinks third way needs to be left starving in the gutter to die?
I'm in a camp that is so apathetic to what happens to third way, I can't even draw up any calories to care. It's a rotting corpse. It's extra biblical. Just leave it there. Nothing lost, nothing gained when it was being used, and nothing lost as it's being abandoned.
Yeah, and he's going to talk, obviously, we're just here at the intro, and I wanted to play that, obviously, to let people kind of see his framing, that he's very specifically trying to make appeals to those of us who do not support or would not align with the third way. And he's going to define what that is his understanding later. So we'll save it until then. So if folks do not know what the third way is, you can sit in mystique as he now moves forward, where he begins discussing his appeals, but he will then give what he believes third way to be as defined.
Number one, please don't caricature third wayism. If it needs to be critiqued, let it be critiqued at its best. If it needs to be exposed as bad and then killed and left behind, let it be exposed, killed, and left behind through steel manning, not through straw manning. I see a lot of rank caricatures of third wayism. The idea that it is moral equivalency, the idea that it means detachment, like we just avoid the issues, where it's cowardice, retreating, and so on and so forth. For years, proponents of third wayism and others like other constructs like this, if you don't like that language, fine, have been addressing this and clarifying this and saying this is not what it is. Tim Keller, for example, has always said it is not about finding a middle ground. It is about nothing other than following the Bible, no matter what, even if the world sees you as an extremist. Christopher Watkin wrote this excellent book, Biblical Critical Theory. It's very clear that third wayism is not splitting the difference between the major political parties that are currently operating. Not only is that not the way forward, that's actually wandering from the faith. Rather, the goal is nothing other than letting the Bible set the table. The Bible does not fit into the modern world. It will rearrange the furniture, so to speak. Trevin Wax makes this point very clearly, that we should not stay above the fray. We should not make it sound like there's moral equivalency between the two parties. There isn't. J.D. Greear, by the way, Griffin Gullidge is the one who drew my attention to that older article. All of these articles are years old. So you'd hope that people would interact with this stuff. It's been out there forever. But a lot of the ways you hear third wayism represented, you're like, that's not a, you can tell they're not trying to put it in a way that a proponent of this could recognize. But I was going to say, Griffin Gullidge is the one who drew my attention to that older article of Trevin's in a tweet, and I thought he made a great point about the danger of a warmed over and politically flavored homogeneous unit principle. If you don't know what that is, Google it. Great insight there.
Okay, so before going forward, Tim Keller, he said it's not about finding a middle ground. That would be a caricature. And information on this has been out there for years for people to familiarize themselves with, so there's no excuse for caricaturing it. But my mind immediately goes to how third wayism practically plays out. And I'm going to beat that drum a lot in this because that's the issue that I have. There's a lot of people that would define the third way like he described because that's what the third way produces. That's why people are saying that, not just because, well, there may be some people out there that are, for whatever reasons, but in terms of me rejecting it, it doesn't have to do with like, well, look, the formal definition over here. It has to do with what it actually produces. Doug, before we listen further, what do you understand the third way to be, and what are your objections to it?
I'm going on a different path than you, because this does have to do with the Summa Theologica of third way, and my opinion of it. And this goes all the way back, to the 80s. Number one, this guy is a lisping, feminized male. That's my theory on third wayism. It is he already sounds more like my therapist than my dad. And it's a cultural thing that's been added on. Same with Tim Keller. These are wussified men. So I'm not going to, I want to give Ortlund credit. He might be a brother. I don't have to like his style at all. I think he's an ass. I don't like him. Tim Keller, I've always been fascinated by his mind. His apologetics are wonderful. I think he's a wussified, awful, feminized man, culturally trying to hold a church together in New York, in hostile territory. And he chose to give up his testicles in the method of how he presents the gospel. And I'm saying there's no obligation for men to do that. That's my number one beef with my understanding of what third wayism is from the like 1,000 miles up. I don't take Gavin as being honest with me, probably because I don't think he's honest with himself. I think he's so deeply deluded in his own cultural personality type that I don't think he's an honest broker in this conversation. So I have no obligation even to assume that he believes his own arguments. I think this is a survival tactic now that third wayism is losing. And some of that has kind of come out. So he says it's not about a middle ground, nor that he says, oh, it's not unbiblical. But that's exactly what it is. So he just made an argument. It's not a compromise of values, but he doesn't say anything with evidence. He just announces it's not a compromise of values. Well, okay, that's a very good opinion. I say, yes, it is. It's a compromise of values. And he says, but you don't offer any evidence. I go, well, you didn't offer any evidence. You just announced that it wasn't a compromise of values with no evidence. So I'm not going to offer any evidence when I say, yes, it is. I'm answering him in kind. He quotes that Watkin. Oh, I thought he said Watkin at first. Christopher Watkin. Oh, those bears. Watkins said, the Bible does not fit in the modern world. I thought that was a very interesting quote. I almost fell out of my chair. Yes, it does. The Bible communicates the mind of God who saw us today. And I'll reference that. We just saw this in church. Miles and I go to the same church. Acts 17:26, where it's Paul addressing in Athens, going, the Lord, appointed the times of men to live, in these certain countries at the appointed time, so that some will find him. What I mean by that is God saw us in every time. He saw you and I living in 2025 and knew that culturally his Bible would be applied to this time. And he expected the culture to be bent and broken under the culture and truth of the Bible, not the other way around. So that Watkin quote sounded like he was going to break the Bible over it's not made for our culture. Well, that tells you that's an indictment of our culture, not the Bible. You see where I'm coming from? They've got the whole world. It's so conciliatory and trying to be relevant that they all sound like this. All of the third wayers that I've ever known, they all sound like these lisping eunuchs. It is actually against the Bible for a man to present himself as a woman. And these men present themselves as women. They're wussy feminists. That's my biggest beef. So I don't have to look at these half men because it's precisely their past ways going all the way back to Keller that are why the church lost so many men today. Problem with youth, problem with men, problem with masculinity. It does end up going, I'm here to tear down their false stronghold, which is rooted in feminism and not the Bible. This is pagan. The affectation. The Bible says, do not have an affectation of a woman, including this guy's very mannerisms that need to be torn down. I will not negotiate with it and present you with pretending like you're an honest broker.
Yeah, the thing that really drives me crazy about this, and this isn't really unique to Gavin. I've heard this from a lot of third wayers. I really, really dislike, and I'm going to bring this up numerous times throughout our response to this. I really do not appreciate this sort of it's just the biblical way. Because what that communicates indirectly is that, well, if you're not on board with this, you're just not in line with the Bible. And it's well, part of the whole critique and part of the whole problem is that's just a begging of the question. Because the people who disagree with you, we obviously don't believe that our position is out of harmony with Jesus or with the Bible, etc. So we're going to see that kind of trickled periodically throughout. But he's going to move to an example next that I'm going to want to listen to a clip on, because it's going to be a perfect example for what I mean around
Pastor Greear.
Yeah, we're going to listen to a clip from J.D. Greear because it's a perfect example of the fruit, in my opinion, of third wayism.
J.D. Greear has an article up at the Gospel Coalition, and it's based on his new book where he talks about this, and he's very clear. It is not that both sides are morally equivalent. And he talks about the particular evils enshrined in the Democratic Party. If you disagree with all of these people, if you disagree with this whole way of thinking, fine, but interact with these clarifications rather than continue to articulate third wayism as in a way that no one who holds to that would recognize.
Okay, pause. Gavin, I understand Gavin not wanting to be strawmanned. Totally get it. Gavin and I are both involved in a lot of the same spaces on YouTube where we're doing polemics and apologetics, and we can't stand being strawmanned. But listen to this clip from J.D. Greear in 2020 when he was the SBC president. It is a perfect example of the point that I was making earlier about the fruit of this political mindset. Let's listen to the clip, and then, Doug, I want to hear your thoughts.
Southern Baptists, we need to say it clearly as a gospel issue. Black lives matter. And that Black Lives Matter is an important thing to say right now, because we are seeing in our country the evidence of specific injustices that many of our black brothers and sisters and friends have been telling us about for years. And by the way, let's not respond by saying, oh, well, all lives matter. Of course all lives matter. But I've heard it described this way. Say you're in a group or with a group at a restaurant, and the waiter brings the food to everybody except for one guy at your table, your friend Bob. And so you say to the waiter, hey, excuse me, Bob deserves food. And somebody at your table corrects you to say, no, all of us deserve food. Well, that's true, but you're missing the point. Bob is sitting there by himself without food. And so we are saying we understand that many of our black brothers and sisters have perceived for many years that the due processes of justice have not worked for them as they have for some others in our country. And by the way, like Jimmy, like Dr. Scroggins says, let's spare each other the quotation of stats right now. You know, if you talk to some black friends, you'll know that they can tell you about their experiences and how some of them can be quite different from others in our country.
So J.D. Greear was guilting Christians, particularly white Christians, regarding George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, calling Black Lives Matter a gospel issue. That move smuggled activist moral assumptions into the church and pressured believers to virtue signal compliance. We later come to find out the mainstream narrative around George Floyd was entirely false and capitalized on by radicals for an agenda. The left in this country responded by inflicting billions of dollars in damage, murdered numerous people, such as Officer David Dorn in St. Louis, who showed up to defend his friend's business because the leftist government didn't do their job. And pastors like J.D. Greear brought in political pressure, brought its toxic mindset into the church, and guilted white Christians for not buying into it, using the guise of this being a gospel issue, which is spiritual manipulation. You can call that a lapse in judgment on Greer's part and say that it isn't definitional of third way, but it is the fruit that so often grows around it. This centrist posture that always seems to tilt left in practice while claiming to just be biblical. Over and over and over, third way rhetoric resolves into a soft alignment with the cultural left, then calls that neutrality. Sorry, I'm not buying it.
That's right.
This is the fruit of third wayism. And don't tell me that it's like, well, it's not trying to find a middle way. But as we're going to see in a moment, it is going to resolve into that, which is, again, why people say that. When he did this, I was just, at the time, at the time we were still at a Baptist church. And so without getting into all of those details, I just remember the angst, the frustration that so many people had, and how people were just continuing, like J.D. Greear did there, to conflate the actual substance of the phrase Black Lives Matter with what clearly was understood in the culture to be this Marxist organization that frauded people out of millions of dollars. They were purchasing lavish houses. They've been, now with hindsight, they were totally, shown that they were totally frauds, etc. Anyways, Doug, what are your thoughts on
This man is a charlatan. Throw him out of the church. There's a wolf among the sheep. And this is it. How dare you impugn the character of the church and just copy and paste the pagan Democrat Party. Black Lives Matter does not care about Black lives. That's why they don't care about the black on black crime in Chicago and never did. And this guy never did either. You do not care about Black lives. The over representation of Black babies aborted over white babies, you don't care. This man is a fraud. Throw him out. That's what I think. He's copying. These are the guys that are smuggling in. This is the entire Democrat Party's talking point is Black Lives Matter. And this guy sticks a little tiny cross on top of their entire political platform. And then MAGA comes in and pushes back on the church and goes, hey, get your politics out of here. And they're going, I can't believe the MAGA politics are coming into the church and it's really dangerous. You guys were silent for 40 years. And I'm saying even bigger than Black Lives Matter is feminism. Feminism over the last 100 years has been completely invited in the church. All these guys talk like it. They act like it. They run their churches like a human resources department. This guy especially is a sicko who did racial quotas in his own hiring. This guy is a racist. You, Pastor Greear, are not my pastor. You're a racist.
He was also silent on Charlie Kirk, by the way. I never saw at least anything on that, but he definitely wasn't obviously on this stuff.
Of course he's silent because his trans buddies shot Kirk. That's why his party knows you be quiet about this guy who is pro-trans, who shot Carter. They all got the talking points from the Democrat Party. We conveniently don't bring that up.
But these types will oftentimes try to posture to you as well that well, no, we are conservatives, but we're just trying to recognize that, as we're going to see in a little bit, there's problems in both directions. There's problems on both sides. And so again, that's why it kind of resolves into this sort of, we don't claim third way is a middle way, but both sides are wrong. So there's kind of this other path. Matt Chandler is another major voice in this third way camp. He did the same thing. He guilted white Christians over George Floyd and framed it as simply being Christ-like and listening to the marginalized. And then you're spiritually abused by these people who have spiritual authority over you and made to feel guilty if you don't get on board, as though it's like the equivalent of rebelling against Jesus or it's going against the Christian faith, etc. But what that really meant in practice was bending the knee to a leftist mob that was burning cities, demanding ideological submission. If you didn't sign on to that narrative, you were labeled as unloving, uncompassionate, or indifferent to injustice. I'm sorry. Miss me with that.
And they're the ones that emphasized melanin and skin color is the identity.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That is formal racism. That is not Martin Luther King, who I respect his colorblind society, the dreams of a color-free world that his daughter will be based on the content of their character. Look at the content of the Black Lives Matter's character and how they burned down the cities. This guy said nothing. He's like, it's implied, the white racism of my people. I heard this all from Phil Vischer. I've heard this from all these third wayers. This is just liberalism. Pagan liberalism smuggled into the church. Again, I hope they lose. I hope it dies in the gutter. I'm going to laugh. I'm laughing at their face instead of even giving them an argument. I'm laughing at his face. Thank God you're irrelevant. May you continue to diminish.
Yeah, Christians are done, I think, with the guilt manipulation. And that is exactly why Gavin is seeing the backlash that he's trying to analyze. People are fed up with this squishy, appeasement-based approach to Christianity and culture and trying to hide it behind, well, it's just the path of Jesus, which in turn says those that disagree aren't on that path.
Yeah, and even Gavin's pretending to listen and pretending to care is fake. He's a liar. He does not care. He is not trying to figure out what MAGA or what Charlie Kirkism or whatever it is. He is not curious. You can say, Doug, you can't know a man's intent. Well, I smell a rat. I've seen it my whole life because I've worked in Hollywood around every liberal in comic books, animation. They all talk the same. They all talk this way. This is pagan, leftist, feminized men. I've seen it 1,000 times before. I don't have to know his address or even get into his heart. It's not genuine. It's passive aggressive. They use it. This is a deflection tactic of when they lose. They pull out this stuff.
Well, and third wayism has practically become like a hall monitor that scolds any believer who shows conviction or courage in a direction that the third wayists deem to be incorrect. We get told not to be too political, yet we're commanded to make disciples of all nations. That means entire cultures, institutions, and leaders brought under the reign of Christ. And Gavin would obviously agree with, the fact that Jesus is king over creation and his rule should be, visible in law, art, media, education, technology, wherever truth, beauty, and goodness are on display. But third wayism is not going to get us there. Sorry, but it won't. Look where it's gotten us. Where's the victory of this? Show me one third way victory. I just want to see one. What victory? All I ever see is that it is trying to tamper down any sort of momentum from the conservative side. It's always like, we're about to see some great victories. Well, no, hold on, guys. You're being too political. But then whenever the left is just running rampant, burning down cities, going crazy, it's, well, guys, we need to listen. We need to understand. We need to just hear them out. They're frustrated. I know that they're, destroying your family business that's never going to come back, that your great grandfather started in 1898 and it just got squelched because of COVID and people were able to come and just graffiti the building and loot it and trash everything. But, they're frustrated and we need to listen. No, it's a pushover approach, which will always get chewed up and spit out by these people who hate us and hate our God. I don't think a lot of this crowd really realizes how bad it is. I don't know about Gavin, I don't know about JD, etc., but I think a lot of these third way guys are just naive. I don't think they really understand the cultural demons that we're against.
They hate their dads and they hate their father God. I think they hate the masculine side of God. They're horrified and apologetic of the Old Testament. They're horrified of definitive statements that Jesus made that were absolutely binary. And they go in and want to turn everything into this conversation with the implication that you could scare someone away from coming to Christ when it's the Holy Spirit that does it, not my amazing erudite argument. They're going like, you did this, you did that. Well, if we're going to look at what has happened with evangelicalism over the last 40 years, they've lost the war on men. They've lost the battle for male souls. They've chased men out of the church. They scared them all away with their affectation.
Yeah, and again, it just makes me think back to, where are the victories? Name the victory. I see a lot of people in this crowd who want to criticize people who are actually making progress. They deem those people to be too far to the right. We're going to hear a little bit about that later, but at least some of those individuals can point to you some actual victories that align with their own framework and ideology. I just want to see one victory that the third way crowd has achieved. And what you're going to find probably is they're going to have to appeal to some sort of secularist, like Bill Clinton type third wayism, some sort of like, which again, then we have to analyze if that's actually a victory. But in terms of the sort of like trying to, what you said, put the cross on this sort of like secular ideology, where is the single Christian victory that this
has
produced?
urgency? Where's
that too? Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying about the naivety.
Where's of being anguish for sin in your society? There's no anguish.
Well, and two, like, how is third wayism going to stop the train that currently has no brakes, where this society hates you? They hate your family. They hate your kids. They hate your God. They are actively conspiring to.
Yeah. And these guys are Neville Chamberlains. They're appeasers to the left.
Yeah.
They said, all peace in our time. We have a deal. We have a deal. So don't, the crocodile, the pacifist thinks that the crocodile eat them last, or whatever it is, that Churchill.
Yeah. Right.
They think they can appease and they can Be the cool kids with the left. The left hate you too. Pastor Greear, if you believe Jesus rose from the dead, they'll throw you in the same gas chamber as me. Just, you slightly after me. You're not gaining any respect from paganism by carrying their water and being a useful idiot for Marxism by bringing it into the church. Get your crap, get your worldly culture out of the church. Get it out.
Well, now Gavin is going to define third wayism as he understands it.
Yeah.
Let's see how it measures up with our understanding.
What is third wayism? In a nutshell, it is very simple. The thinking is this: contemporary conservative politics, especially in the United States, has important differences from historic Christianity. And even if those differences are not as dire as the political left, they are still important enough that they are worth pointing out. From our perspective, this is not really a third way. It's just the first way. We just want to follow Jesus, and it is that simple.
But it isn't that simple, Gavin, because what you intend to do doesn't always lead to good conclusions. Like we just saw with that doozy of a J.D. Greear struggle session. The people who oppose this also believe they are following Jesus. And this is one of my biggest gripes with this concept. Like I said, it often comes across as this passive aggressive shaming on those of those on the right. It makes it sound like those who don't conform to this fluid and flimsy ideology that's just tossed to and fro by every wind of the culture. It makes it sound like people who don't succumb to that aren't following the first way, which is just being a Christian, allegedly. Again, I understand he's speaking from their perspective, but he said in response videos, he's wanting to hear why people are opposed to this ideology, some even being hostile toward it. It's because we saw it in action in the age of BLM, summer of 2020, the shutting down of churches in 2020, with COVID, Charlie Kirk, Kyle Rittenhouse, and countless other culture war issues. And I never see it achieve victory. And very regularly, it succumbs to cultural pressure from one side in particular, the left. I've only ever seen it stifle those on the right, to tame down any sort of righteous indignation that swells within them and would motivate them to put an end to the madness in our nation while simultaneously guilting them as being unchristlike or what have you. I think Christians are tired of the be content with being a loser mindset, which really gets us into eschatology and shows why what you believe about the future matters. But Doug, what were your thoughts on this definition of the third way? Because I didn't even really hear anything here. He just mentioned basically that like the third way is the recognition that there are things in modern conservatism today that are out of sync with historic Christianity.
This is what I mean by it's all a giant struggle session, and it is a cultural layer that purports to be a philosophy. It's not a philosophy. It is a cut and paste photocopy of just liberal affectation. It's like my gay friends, they start out, they grow up with you, they're like, hey, let's get some girls. And then they go to college, they turn gay, and they're lisping. They're suddenly swishing. Hey, Doug, hello. I love show tunes, and you just go, well, where did that come from? Is that genetic? Did God make you that way? Because I remember when you used to, like beef jerky. You never met a gay man who chewed tobacco. It's like, this is all cultural affectation of all these guys. I guarantee you there's not a single third wayer in the world that chews tobacco. Period. Go find one. You're not going to find one because this is all a cultural movement. I'm a mass media artist. Okay. I have to go out and read what I think 500,000 people will like in a video game. So I have some ideas of what makes people tick and seeing what is a mass movement. And this is just another cultural mass movement of feminism in the church. That's why I'm going to keep going back to that. Third wayism is nothing more than the way that and all these men, all these arguments are passive aggressive because they're being good little third wayist women. So all of them are, including this last argument that he makes. He's like, if you just want to hear how we think, no, you don't think, you feel. Don't even give yourself the compliment of saying that you think. You don't think, you're feeling your way around this whole thing. And Charlie Kirk got shot, and now you're going, oh my gosh, everything snapped off a month ago. Now we're caught. Now we're in trouble. We got to culturally come up with more therapy speak to have a struggle session and a conversation. We just want to reach out to the other side and empathize with your point of view and walk a mile in your shoes. No, you don't. No, you don't. You're trying to pull that corpse out of the gutter and bring it back alive again, and it's done. This is all a passive aggressive tactic, and Gavin's doing it again. There is nothing here that is biblical that anyone is obliged to follow. Even when he says you're gonna don't straw man, and I go, no. How about I do straw man? How about you're a wussy? I don't care, because even the rules of you do not straw man and the way that they use their methods are strained first through their human resources, feminist worldview and lifestyle. See what I mean? They're even trying to conduct this argument. Don't do this, don't do that. I go, how about you don't tell me what to do, say, and think? You've never argued with someone like me, nor would you, nor would I want to, because you're such a lizard. You just shed your skin. I would never be able to nail down a fact. And he'd sit there, and I guarantee you already, he would just sit there and show offense and go, see, guys, this is the kind of thing I'm talking. See, Doug, see, this guy, he reminds me of my dad. He once criticized me and said I had to get a job. He was a coal miner or a trucker.
Yeah, speak into what you mean by, because I know a lot of I've seen discussion around third wayism being feminism and influenced by that. Speak into that a little bit more. What have you seen? Because you're engaged with this stuff a lot more than a lot of people. You obviously do every week, multiple videos a week. You're doing media analysis essentially, and you see the temperature of where things are at culturally. And then you hear like an approach like this. And so for me, I can clearly connect the dots as to what you're getting at when you say that this is like basically like almost like quasi feminism. What exactly do you mean when you're saying that?
Feminism in the last 100 years has there's a lot of evil things that rise up that the church knows to fight against, but feminism wasn't one of them. So the church just let it in. And it affects our music, the way we communicate, the way preachers conduct themselves, forms of conflict resolution, even that word, conflict resolution. It's just nowhere, it's not in the Bible, okay? And the Bible comes from an extremely both, the feminist, the feminine view and the masculine view are intact in a Bible by a God who made them separate, but wonderful. Feminism hates the distinctions between men and women. And that's a modern movement of the last 100 years. It wants to remove all distinctions, and God forbids us from doing that, including, certain rules about men with hair or women with head coverings or whatever. There are distinctions is all I'm saying. And certainly that you cannot have a man and a man occupy the same roles as a man and a woman in marriage. You'll see it in just this week. I noticed it with when Pam Bondi was brought before Congress, and Dick Durbin goes up to her and he's asking her questions. She goes, "You impugn my character. I don't have to answer to you." That was a masculine response from a woman, Pam Bondi. And Dick Durbin said exactly what Ortlund would say to me. He'd go, "See, this is exactly the kind of response we would expect from this administration." That wasn't an argument. It was just a passive aggressive faux outrage. He may be actually outraged, but I'm saying it's how he's trying to win an argument. And it's not in and of itself a list of facts, a list of absolute. He has not given a full scriptural anything about third wayism. They can't back it up because Jesus didn't use the third way. He even lets his mask slip. He goes, when we say third wayism, we really mean the first way. Oh, now we're getting to it. Now you put it in the first place. You actually believe it's objectively morally true, and that this isn't a discussion. This is, if you believe in sola scriptura, you'll take that first way, which is the third way. Mask slipped. You're more judgmental than me. you're more intolerant than me, you're less a participant in this communication, you do not want to have a conversation with me. I might have a conversation with you. I don't think this guy would ever stand up to a conversation. I think he'd run off and cry in the corner. Go, look, this kind of vicious talk is just not part of us. Jesus, the kindest, humblest, most gentle person, the definition of it, turned tables over in the temple. They'll bring up all the scriptures about never say a unkind word over. They won't bring up the scripture of Jesus turning over a temple. And I'm saying, this is my Father's house. Get your pagan crap out, because I'm turning a table on you. That's where my hostility in my voice comes from. It's where my anger comes from. It is righteous, and it's because you have brought paganism into the church. That's when so feminism is simply having men act like women and women act like men. Okay, and that's happened for 100 years.
Second appeal, and this flows right out of that, is beware of the no enemies to my right mentality. Now, most of you get this. Most good faith people who disagree with me on these questions, thank you. Truly, thank you. You agree with this, you get this, you're not going to push back on this point, most of you. But what I think is more dangerous is those who will say, and maybe you've been feeling this already, is, okay, yeah, that's true. Technically, there's some bad stuff on the right, but it's not a big deal. There's a few people over there that need a nudge, but that's not the real threat. Stop putting the focus, stop acting like this is something that's big that we need to talk about, and so on and so forth. And let me make an appeal, if that's how you feel. I understand. First, I would just say, we got to remember, all of us are affected by the algorithms, all of us, okay? So all I'm saying from this point is we need to listen to each other for the experiences others have had. Believe me, if you can, believe me, I really am trying to listen, and I'm learning from people who disagree with me. I'm saying, okay, I got to see the world through their eyes. What experiences have you had? But the algorithms tend to confirm our biases. And so we need to be aware of, okay, I got to listen to what other people are saying, because it might not all be coming up on my feed. I might think something's not a big deal because I don't see it, but the reason I don't see it, I'm not omniscient. It may not be served up to me through the algorithm.
So Gavin, brother to brother, the reason this approach comes across as flat for many people, I'm just going to shoot it to you straight, is because their algorithm is their eyes. Their algorithm is their bedroom window, not their cell phone. Their city has been utterly destroyed by violent fanatics, not right-wing extremism. Their family business was permanently destroyed to never return. Generational wealth and building down the tubes. And for what? He's going to give examples he has in mind in a moment, but this was just another way of saying both sides need to tone it down. Only it's being said as, the only reason you think one side is the problem is because of the algorithm. It isn't, though. And this, to me, shows why many of us see third way is trying to be a middle way, even if the formal definition proposed says otherwise.
And it's just another Democrat argument. Once again, the algorithm has so hypnotized my stupid brothers, but I'm the wise one and I see both sides. This is like the argument, the relativist argument that talks about the elephant. They go, one guy feels the trunk and thinks the elephant is long. One guy feels the ears and says the elephant is like two leaves. One guy feels the leg and it feels like a tree. He goes, the elephant's a tree trunk. They're trying to say that's all the different religions. And there's one guy, the narrator, who's the wisest man in the world, who goes, well, I know it's an elephant with all these different parts. He's doing the same thing. He's going like, now the right, they're just zombies under this hateful algorithm. But me, I can see what's happening to you. I'm the wise man on the hill seeing the entire elephant. And to make my point again, this is just another copy and paste Democrat argument. We saw at the end of the Biden administration, he came out and everyone had the big warning, because they thought Elon Musk threw this election for Trump. And Biden goes, just be very careful it's just the hatred and the deep money oligarchy that is funding this side. And I warn you about oligarchy. I can show you 100 clips from different sources of Democrats that warn people of the big tech oligarchy. And what's his argument? He stole this from the Democrat Party, what they've been saying about misinformation and disinformation and Elon Musk and all along, because they're going like, look, we're smart. We would never fall for an algorithm, even though my argument is you've been copying and pasting feminism into the church for 40 years. You have zero difference between your average therapist and feminist, you and Tim Keller, and never have had a difference. And now you're going to use their argument saying, unlike me, who's been saturated in feminism, I can see the feminism. No, you can't. You're blinded by your algorithm. As you said, your eyes are your algorithm.
Yeah.
You've been soaking in it for so long. You can't see. This is just more Democrat copy and paste, Elon Musk and the algorithm. These and frankly, it's insulting too. It's Doug, you're so dumb. You're just a victim of this, whatever. I actually study way more of both sides of an argument than this guy does as a discipline for 40 years. I've read your books. I read Derrida. I read Blue Like Jazz. I read Wittgenstein. I read Marx. The right is saturated in Marx. We study him all the time. But you don't study Doug Wilson. You don't study the right. You did not study Charlie Kirk. You don't study the other side. You don't know any rednecks. You don't eat biscuits and gravy at a trailer park when your aunt is addicted to fentanyl like mine. You don't do that. You hang out with your city. Tim Keller hung out he might have known some drug addicts, but it was all New York saturated culture. He just bled it, oozed it. This is elitism, snobby elitism. You don't know rednecks. You have not shot a gun this month like the rest of us have. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just called, these people are all dumb. They're stuck in an algorithm. Well, you're stuck in a bigger algorithm.
Well, another thing I think about too is like, well, what if we have listened and our view is not changed? Well, what if we have done these sorts of things? And again, it just goes back to this idea of like, there's just this sort of underlying assumption that it's like, this is the correct way and you have to agree. And if you don't, well, you're not being very Christ-like. I'll hear them dismiss stuff. People can have their faults with Doug Wilson for a variety of reasons, and people do. But I mean, dismissing it as like, well, he uses some not the nicest of words. he uses some offensive words. He uses unbecoming speech of a pastor. He uses
like Paul.
Yeah, and they'll say that, well, you're abusing those situations. Those are very specific contexts. And again, I just kind of go back to like, man, do you not understand the hour that we are in? Do you not understand how bad things have gotten? And again, it kind of goes back to this. We have this long trajectory of this sort of mindset and mentality. I would classify, just very broadly speaking here, the third way crowd fits in very well with like the seeker sensitive crowd, with the emerging church crowd, with these sort of like Christians need to be like a doormat in the culture. If we really want to make headway, we've really got to just like succumb and be a doormat because, well, Jesus said we're going to be persecuted for the faith. Yeah. Jesus said this and that. And it always just gets used as this sort of like trump card, no pun intended, to where you're just supposed to like suck it up, just like with the BLM stuff that we saw with JD Greear. It always seems to just come back to like, again, you on the right are ultimately the ones in the wrong, and you need to tone things down. And like you said, it just comes across like you're doing like a quasi sort of covert Democrat Party line talking point that you're trying to like basically baptize and bring into the church and then try and disciple the sin out of it. When it's like, well, no, dude, it's just rotten to the core. There's nothing in it that is worth redeeming. And I don't even know why trying to keep it alive is worth it.
He's allowed to, hey, take on this culture, buddy. It's just cultural. Don't try to tell me it's the Bible. And then don't look at my culture and say, I'm going to judge your culture by my culture. What you can do is judge my sin that is extra biblical with your on topic Bible, taking all sides of all issues, looking at the entirety of Scripture, and you want to make a judgment against me and correct me with the word, I have no other obligation but to follow what you say. So go make that point. But the problem is your worldview is rooted in culture, in a modern thing that's come about in the last 100 years. It's not there 2,000 years ago. So all you can do is do the same methods of confrontation that we would all get at a sensitivity training at Nickelodeon. I've been through it. It sounds exactly like this. It's exactly this. And they're claiming their cultural preferences are objective moral truth. And I'm saying you like vanilla ice cream and I like chocolate ice cream. Don't come and tell me that my chocolate ice cream, liking it, is a sin.
Yeah, you bring up something interesting, actually, in light of what he has kind of said, that well, the third way is actually the first way, and it's just trying to be like, Christianity of 2,000 years ago. But the irony is that no, your whole mentality and mindset here is literally a modernist thing.
100%.
This whole thing is a modernist thing that's totally foreign to. If you want to talk about, the current cultural right is, a novelty in terms of historic Christianity, your third wayism is exactly that.
Yeah.
Well, he's going to move now into the specific issues on the right. And let's hear what he has to say about what those are.
Many of us in real life have had pastoral experiences, church experiences, and relational experiences that convince us that, yes, there are some things on the right that are a problem. There are various forms of overreaction against wokeness, unhealthy forms of hypermasculinity working out in a marriage relationship that's really toxic and bad, undersensitivity to the sin of racial prejudice, including even anti-Semitism, explicitly so in some circles. I wish I could say these were small problems that don't even merit mentioning. But unfortunately, especially spending time on the internet, interacting with young men, seeing what they're being influenced by, yes, these are real issues.
But see, the issue I have with this is the issues he mentions have not had the large scale impact that we often see discussed and taking place in the culture war. Is anyone honestly arguing that there aren't people out there that fall victim to various toxic ideologies? Is anyone really arguing that there aren't people out there that get sucked into the Andrew Tate manosphere deception,
Yeah.
even many Christians?
Yeah.
It almost becomes a category error to compare that to the large-scale coordinated leftist destruction which has ravaged the nation, has taken over entire institutions, wants to steal your children away from you and make laws to where they can secretly be doing stuff at schools that they're not going to tell you about. It just seems out of touch for me for someone to miss this. Gavin, we're talking about political violence, large scale, large funded pushes to mutilate your children, the burning down of entire cities when someone simply does their job. Inserting into this, well, there's people who embrace distasteful views of the Jews entirely misses the point. Is anyone arguing that? Who show me the person out there that is saying there's not a single sinful person on the right? Obviously. Third wayism champions the whole there's problems on both sides mantra, but often flattens out that the problem is 100x on one side versus the other. And the side with the 100x problem has such a national impact that manifests right outside of your house, in your neighborhood, or in your city. But Doug, the Nick Fuenteses and Andrew Tates of the world are producing a large-scale problem on the right that is equivalent to what we see on the left, right?
Yeah, not even close. Nick Fuentes is a freak show. So's Candace Owens. So's Andrew Tate. I asked my son, he knew who Andrew Tate was. I go, why in the world would you watch that guy? And he goes, I think he's funny. And, he's a man who looks fed up. So the males in our society are looking for men who are sounding like their feelings that they're being beaten up as men. Our young men are. And these guys do not articulate that. So they go to an Andrew Tate,
Yep.
who perfectly embodies their feelings, though he's evil. You know what I mean? Or Trump, who's not saved or whatever. I don't know, but I'm assuming he's not a Christian. I don't know, but and then you have a Barack Obama. If you ever listened to his prayer that he gave at the men's prayer breakfast, it's all perfectly scriptural. But as Bill Maher said, a liberal said, I know Barack Obama is lying. He's probably an atheist. So you have a liar who says the right words. And then guys like Trump and Andrew Tate are saying a lot of wrong words, but they mean it. And there's an authenticity there that males are attracted to. And I'll only say on the anti-Semite, the racism off the charts on the left, off the charts. They treat blacks as dogs, like they own them, if they're not killing them, advocating for killing them. And their feminist values have decimated the black family at a much higher rate than whites. So again, I already saw Greear trying to take away my argument if I'm going to bring up all the stats. Well, the stats are on my side. That's why you wanted to take it out of the argument and go, they'll come up with all the stats. Yeah, because we're right. That's why you have to use your passive aggressive method of going, you're going to bring up all these arguments that are done. Yeah, you better believe it, I am, because you guys did this. Your worldview of softness did this. The anti-Semitism on the left is insane. The anti-Semitism against Israel with actually elected officials, saying from the river to the sea, basically a genocidal statement against Jews to a point that Kamala Harris couldn't pick Josh Shapiro as a vice president. She had to pick Tim Walz that she also didn't want because Josh Shapiro was a Jew who was once in the IDF for a small amount of time. She thought she'd lose the election over him. So their anti-Semitism is 10 times worse. Have you ever heard him, Ortlund, call out the left's anti-Semitism?
No.
Or is it just the right? It's like these little cartoon Comic-Con cosplayer groypers. They're there. I despise them. I think they're stupid, but they're small, they're young, and they're ignorant. The lefts are widespread, highly educated, and large. These are influencers at all sides of office. And for them to come out on the anti-Semitism, look, if you just want to have a little win, you want to have a little win against the right, congratulations. If you removed the anti-Semitism in the right, every Jew still couldn't walk down the streets in comfort in New York City because of Democrat anti-Semitism. The blacks that were knocking out Jews, doing the knockout club, those weren't MAGA.
Yeah. The thing that gets me with this is if we're talking about asking questions, which Gavin is talking about, we need to talk and ask questions and hear the other side. Here's my question. Have you thought to maybe ask, why are people turning to these radical online voices? Yeah. It's because they're sick of seeing this weak, watered down, feminized version of, well, you already said it earlier. They are sick of seeing this. And unfortunately, to find what naturally, jives with if they're men, which is typically who he's referring to here, they're looking for people who are actually imbibing that sort of natural male, when you're just fed up with corruption and you're fed up with just the way that the society is going, you look for strong men to lead. Mm-hmm. And the problem is when they look to the church, that's not what they're seeing. They're seeing this. Yeah, the person that's plugged in, that's going and listening to the people that Gavin is concerned that people in his church or whatever church are going and finding, yet those people would chew you up and spit you out. that crowd would chew this third way, soft, whatever stuff up and spit you out. And a lot of those people profess to be Christians. So then you add a whole nother layer to this, where again, you can't just kind of assume that it's like, well, this is just the Christian way. And if you, they're not going to listen to any of that stuff. So my question is, what is your antidote to this solution? Your antidote to this solution is to hold more struggle sessions. Again, we already lived through the summer of 2020. BLM, Kyle Rittenhouse, all these other various periods of time, and it doesn't work.
And
it doesn't
1980s family therapy and Alcoholics Anonymous and all the therapying that went on in the church, all of the sensitive man discussions. You know, I went to a Bible study. This was at Fellowship Bible, and I knew I didn't belong there. It was a men's Bible study. They said, "Who's going to name their sins? Let's confess our sins to each other." Oh, cool. Okay. Around the circle, this guy, I eat too much. This guy, I really need to exercise more. This guy, I really need to listen to my wife some more. They're all amen. They're all writing it down. They come to me and I go, I have a problem with pornography. I look at people having sex and masturbate to it. And they all went silent. They treated me even though they all struggle with the same sin. But our men are not allowed to even be men in a men's Bible study. You're not allowed to talk and be blunt and carry each other's burden. You just have to sit there and do this shallow, thin veneer, acceptable, safe discussion group where it becomes a giant, it's like group dynamics therapy class. And the youth are just saying, I'm not saved by that. That is not working on the struggles and the sins and the problems that I have in my life. This is not an answer. And they keep trying to, they're trying to talk their way out of this. You're not going to talk your way out of this, out of sin on the right and the left. Your sin has to be killed. Not therapied, not have a conversation. It's not a conversation. It's repent. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I think young males respect that a lot more than you said a bad word, you're hateful.
Two that I think are particularly increasing and need to be addressed. First, the sheer amount of lack of charity in discourse. There is a real viciousness to the way discussions happen. And in the online spaces right now, especially on X, the cancel tactics of the far left are being mimicked in the reverse direction by the far right. And there's a certain demographic of people that will swarm and then seek to utterly discredit a person. And the people being targeted are often pretty conservative, but they represent a threat or a challenge in some way or another, and so they are effectively canceled. It's ugly. It's not edifying. It's not constructive. There's a lot of name calling, pretty gross and sexual insults at times. And then those things get defended as though that was courageous. And a lot of times there's just sheer lying and slander that is utterly disgraceful. And it's totally appropriate to say, I'm broadly historically conservative. I'm pro-life. I'm going to stand against the far left. I just want to be a faithful Christian, but I'm allowed to talk about these problems on the right, these sins of speech, for example, this lack of charity and disagreement, and not shrug that off. If I were to shrug off sins of speech as though they're not a big deal, I would be going against about 1/3 of the New Testament. Read James chapter 3, for example, about how the tongue can send you to hell. Think about the words of our Lord, who is saying, when you insult your brother, you're liable to the fire of hell. Okay, we are allowed to take this seriously when our Lord is saying, this can send you to hell. And if I may be blunt, those kinds of sins of speech are playing out, escalating in our online discourse. We have a major issue. This is not a small matter. How we talk to each other matters. Just to speak vulnerably, when I put out a video on these topics, it is shocking. The emails I will get, the things that people will clip out and try to spin this way and that way and so forth. There is slander. It is a problem. It's okay to take that seriously and try to address it.
Mean words on the internet, while yes, they can be sinful, are not equivalent to one side committing political violence, burning down cities, unaliving Christians, attacking churches, etc. I'm sorry, but this is why so many people are sick of this sort of there's problems on both sides position. I haven't seen anyone deny that there are sinners who identify with the right wing in the culture. Sinners guilty of slander, sure. But again, this just comes across to me as an elevating of the issues on one side in order to balance out the other when they're not even close in comparison. That's just what my mind keeps going to whenever I hear this stuff is like, okay, you're identifying that, yep, there are people out there who fall prey to all sorts of things. Gavin, there's people that fall prey to Mormonism. There's people that fall prey to all sorts of deceptions out there. How does this compare to when we're talking about in the culture, there are two sides. There's very clearly one side that is fomenting, that is committing political violence, mass at just an astronomical scale that is completely destroying our society. And you want to then compare that and say, yeah, but on the right, there's people like Doug Wilson who called a woman a nasty word one time or used a word one time that, dude, how does that even compare? How does that even compare? This is the same thing, like you said, that the Democrats do. This is exactly what they will do, except it'll typically be on an even bigger scale because it's like a big national sort of thing. But this is exactly what they'll do. They'll go out and when they're in control and in power, they'll do all sorts of things. They'll um, uh, uh, political shams with Trump or whoever it may be. They'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal. But then when they're not in power, they'll cry foul. They'll point out the immorality of
That's
the
what
other
this whole
side.
thing is. That's what
It's
this
like,
whole
dude,
thing
get
is.
a break. This is a complete false equivalence. It's obvious. And again, my algorithm is my eyes, not X, not Facebook. My algorithm is my own eyes.
I always say passive aggressive is aggressive. Passive aggressive is still an aggression. And just because Gavin is passive aggressive doesn't mean that it gets dismissed as gentle speech. So those verses in Timothy are an indictment of all, especially me. But he has essentially called us a fool. He said, "You fool." But he just said it with a gentle lisping voice. His tongue sets the same fires mine does. And you can put a bridle on a horse, whatever, but the tongue, steers a ship. It's the rudder of a ship, and it steers the course of your life. And I'll only say that I see more passive aggressive evil than overt aggressive evil in America. And it probably has to do with where we live in our time, because we're a high civilization, if not the end of our civilization, but very high, very well read, coming out of a time of manners, probably 100 years ago, greater manners than we do now. Yes, sir, no, sir, open a door. The gentleman across the aisle, you see our congressmen do, and that's all about to go away. We have elevated speech, and because of it, we can't do overt aggression, just call another guy a name. So we passive aggressive it. And it's exactly as fork-tongued and setting the exact same fire. In fact, if you see a guy just go belligerent and start screaming, you know to dismiss him. It actually doesn't hurt as much as what a truly skilled golem-like vampire does with his words. This is, Gavin doesn't use the F word, I do. It just shows that he mastered a tactic that's used as a commodity among the left. This is a skill that's part of their tone, and they use it to attack you. It's like the people that correct your grammar when you make a good argument, and they think that they won because they got you on grammar. That's what he's doing here. So it's exactly as hateful or worse than just speaking bluntly. He also doesn't mention the tone of Jesus on the or Paul's words. I'd love to hear his take on that. Just find the most brutal thing that they say. Just quote as, Phil Robertson of Duck Dynasty used to just read the Bible about homosexuality, and people would say it was hateful. He just read the words as gentle as he could, and we've heard it. The Bible is hate speech. They project hostility. Democrats also say silence is violence, where if you don't say anything enough about Black Lives Matter, you're committing overt violence. So all these definitions of, again, this is just his projecting what he sees on his hatred of the right and his suspicion of the right. I'm not saying the right is good and you have to give it a pass. I'm only saying that your critique, Gavin, does not hold water, and there's zero introspection to it. So we should measure out the amount of anger based on how egregious is the sin. I think if I, cut his finger off, he'd scream and might call me a name. He'd probably be justified in doing that because that would be a pretty egregious sin. And that's what Jesus did in the temple. And what the right has done in the last 2 weeks over Charlie Kirk, we did not burn any towns down. We didn't shoot anybody. We praised God. That's our way. That's our fourth way. Gavin, do you have a problem with that? We praised God. I watched Erica Kirk forgive the murderer of her husband right after he was shot in public. That's our side. Your side injured 25 cops, did $2 billion worth of damage over Black Lives Matter, burned a Wendy's to the ground, as the news and your whole side, probably your whole church, said it was mostly peaceful. So it's the abuse that masculine men in the church and masculinity has faced over the last 40 years is disgusting. It's cruel. These people are pulling the wings off of flies. It's a slow motion death. And Gavin is part of the problem. And I don't see him looking for a solution.
Another issue is the constant separating and fighting and being suspicious of other people over secondary and tertiary doctrines. This is increasing in the world, not decreasing. It's a problem on the right. It's a problem we need to address. We're allowed to take this seriously. So historically, in fundamentalist circles, you can look back 80 years and see how this would happen with other issues. The timing of the rapture, the nature of the rapture, its relation to the tribulation, something like this. Okay, we can look back with 80 years of perspective and say, they probably shouldn't have splintered their whole movements over these kinds of differences. But we're doing that again today. And I think one of the big areas is this one, over politics. That's what I'm trying to say. Whatever else we do, can we stop being so much at each other's throats over these kinds of issues? There's this all or nothing package deal way of thinking. That's what comes in. It's the same kind of thing with the pre-trib versus post-trib rapture, but now it's political issues. So for me, if I'm passionately pro-life, which I am, I would give my life for that in a heartbeat. If I defend a traditional view of marriage as between one man and one woman, which I do, tomorrow I'm flying to a conference to speak on that. But if I believe in climate change, which I also do, then now I'm the enemy. It's like, you're down the line, stepped out of line, banish them from the camp. It's this kind of way of thinking. And it's the same fundamentalist mindset that just won't allow for critical thought and making distinctions and having a sense of proportion. The very word nuance is now seen as a bad word in some circles. And so the appeal that I would make for people today, especially people like good faith people who are kind of sorting their way through this and disagree with me, and you're saying, yeah, third wayism is bad, we need to bury that and move forward. Okay, fine. Please hear this appeal. Please don't stop addressing problems like this on the right. Okay? Let's revive a historic evangelicalism, not create a new fundamentalism. Historic evangelicalism was a balancing act between different alternative errors. What people like Billy Graham and Carl Henry and Harold John Ockenga were explicitly trying to do is say no to the liberals over there, but also no to the fundamentalists over there. They both have problems. We need to fight in multiple directions. Some of us feel a similar kind of mindset right now.
But Gavin, that sounds exactly like a middle way that you said is not what the third way actually is.
Yeah.
It's like right there. Okay, so it is this like middle way thing. And no, I don't think we need to revive. This just goes back to what you just mentioned earlier, Doug. This like 80s mindset of like, no, look, we're in the reaping season of the sowing season of all of that. We're reaping the fruit and the results of that right now. No, we don't need to go back to all that. Again, we already saw this mindset applied just within the last 10 years during all sorts of cultural hubbub. And look at the fruit.
Yeah.
Where are the victories? Show me one single victory that this mentality has achieved. Don't point me to like, well, you know, we just, it's a better witness to the world. These are the sorts of things I'll hear from them is like, well, you know, the victory is that that Christ is truly represented. And then we just kind of have to let the chips fall where they may. Meanwhile, the city is on fire. The Wendy's is burning down. Your family business has been destroyed and looted. And, oh, you're going to be guilted if you're a white person because, well, you know, you probably, your family probably got that from unlawful gain anyways and took it from somebody else. So you need to just listen. You need to, we're having this, you know, a buddy of mine
empathize with their lived experience.
Yeah, exactly.
You
know, there's people.
Words. Yeah.
There's people at our church now, Doug, who are literally there because of literally the third way approach being foisted upon everybody at their church during 2020. And that was the fruit of that sort of approach to these cultural issues. People are done. They are done. I've talked with, I don't know how many people. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you know as well, obviously, because you're way more involved in the political media analyst sort of thing. Mm-hmm. People are fed up. They are done. If you think that this sort of tactic and approach is what is going to talk them off the ledge, they're not buying it anymore, man. They're not buying it anymore. We're done.
And what did you think of the moral equivalence between his global climate change versus homosexuality and abortion? He's like, I believe abortion's wrong. I believe in traditional marriage. And I believe in global climate issues or whatever.
Yeah,
how can you say that in the same sentence?
He's more than likely referring to his long-standing feud that has taken place between him. Well, it's been more so on Megan Basham's side, but he's more or so referring to that, I would guess, because his video regarding that made its way. Some of the information from that made its way into her book, Shepherds for Sale. And there's kind of just been this long standing, you know, she's been calling that out. She's like
calling out the funding, the money that came into the church for a lot of these charlatans to push, you know, to equate global warming, global climate change, environmental issues, recycling, to equate it in a sentence with an abomination, what the Bible calls an abomination.
Well, and I don't think like I get what he's saying there, like I said, because I know that there are some people who they do have that sort of approach of like, if there's one thing I find out you disagree with me on, I'm just going to totally throw you out. But that's like a good example.
Well, hold on. But that's a little bit of a not quite catching what I'm at here. We all have disagreements.
No, for sure. I was speaking for him.
I'm for infant baptism and you're against it. I go, that's no different than being for gay marriage.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't belong on the list. Our little differences, political differences. And he's going, he's mad that I would throw him out of the church. I would throw him out of the church if he put global climate change on the same scriptural level as abortion.
Yeah, and for sure. And that is an issue. I guess I was more so thinking about how I know the situation he's more than likely alluding to. So I know that there are people out there who do have this mentality of like, they're not necessarily categorizing stuff on the same level like that. It's just this sort of like fundamentalism of like, here's the set of beliefs. If you hold anything outside of this, we're going to throw you out. And okay, yeah, that is a problem. But equating those of us that take umbrage with third wayism as basically being like neo-fundamentalists. That's basically what I got from this here is like, if you're going to push back on this, be careful to not basically turn into like a neo-fundamentalist. Well, my issue isn't Gavin's take on climate change. I haven't extensively. I don't even know if he's extensively made content on that. If he has, I haven't seen a ton of it. I've heard him talk about it in passing.
His own words about climate change, and I know him being a lefty, they have to elevate it to a point of a religion. It's their number one.
Well, he's going to take umbrage with that. So why would you classify him as a lefty? Because he says there that, well, he stands for traditional marriage. He would die for the pro-life cause, etc. I've seen the same thing from
and he goes, but if I believe in climate change, people want me away. I'm only saying the issue number 2 is suspicious of people with secondary or tertiary issues. And I only want to ask him, is me recycling? If I take a plastic bottle and you and I are on a church, jogathon, and I throw it in a pristine wilderness, is that as important to you as my position on abortion? Like, are you going to give me holy hell? Or if I take a car battery, full of battery acid, and I put it in a pristine river, are you going to bring me before church discipline? But if I have an abortion, or if I have a gay lover, or I'm attracted to the same sex, does that get a pass? Because my whole thing is I actually want politics out of the church more than anyone on the left. I want politics out of the church. I want to be submitted just to the Bible. It's these people that keep bringing in morally obfuscate, equate killing an unborn baby with me using coarse talk.
Yeah. That's again a very perceptive sort of catch there.
Yeah.
That
are they being divisive if they allow an abortionist in their congregation? Are they being divisive, or am I for demanding they be removed? Who's being divisive?
Yeah, and I don't think Gavin would classify that as necessarily a tertiary thing. I think he would say that in the list that he's giving, the tertiary thing is the climate change issue, and that a person shouldn't be thrown out because of the climate change issue. But what's interesting about that is, okay, couldn't another person come along and again essentially say the same thing, but with a different set of things? You see what I'm saying? Couldn't another person come along? How is the third wayist going to respond? How's Phil Vischer? How is he going to respond to the person who comes along if you have this sort of mentality and mindset here of like, well, there's these tertiary things and we got to do triage and we've got to, have the hierarchy. Well, what about another person who comes along and says, yeah, well, I don't agree with your hierarchy.
Right.
This one is abortion isn't actually,
you don't want to unnecessarily
shouldn't be a dividing
the church over tertiary issues. I agree. But if I wear a T-shirt to Phil Vischer's or Ortlund's church, and it has Elon Musk doing this, and I think it's really funny, and I put that on a shirt and I wear it, and there's someone in worship who says, I'm so offended by that T-shirt that I can't worship God, that guy is doing a pro-Nazi, whatever, symbol on his shirt, and I don't find it funny, and can you have him remove it? And if I say, well, I'm sitting in a church and that guy over there, he believes recycling is effective, and I don't want to see a recycler in this church. I don't want to see a recycling bin. Who gets their way? Who gets their way? I don't get my way and have them remove the bin. We all know what's going to happen. They're going to come to me and go, Doug, for the weaker brother, can you please just, change the shirt, turn it inside out? Third way is always just my way. It's just another totalitarian way of putting Democrat flavor and culture and tertiary issues at the top. So now he's saying, this is very passive aggressive once again. Now he's saying, don't get mad at me for holding on to trivia in the church. And we'll just, okay, fine, don't mention it. Don't bring it up. No, he wants to be able to bring it up and have me not say anything about it. I say it's pagan. It's pagan, rooted in earth worship. It has nothing to do with science, has nothing to do with the earth's temperature or saving people's lives. It's another cult in the church, worshiping the creation over the creator and believing that mankind is going to destroy the world. And that's the number one death sentence to all of mankind. And it's another top tier Democrat Party position that you want to cling to. No, get your politics, your trivial tertiary politics out of the church. Get your environmentalism out of it. I don't want to see a recycle in there. I don't want to see your pressure on, it's a waste of time. Same with Black Lives Matter. Don't talk about it from the pulpit.
Well, that's what's so interesting about this too, is like this, the third way crowd will say that same thing you just said, we need to get the politics out of the church, and then they'll do the BLM
right
struggle session.
That's why I left the last church and came to our church, was over that issue.
Yeah. So it's just like, do you not have makes me wonder about the self-awareness of some of this as well. It's like, do you not have self-awareness? It's like, it's okay when it's a specific issue that the left has fomented up out in the culture, that's just become, the pressure is so high on churches now that, okay, it took all that pressure and now you're going to succumb to it. And it's just the sort of like, hey guys, we need to acknowledge this. Let's just, it just is so infuriating.
And I have to listen to a black guy with his grievance culture. Fine. I'll listen to your story. But did anyone listen to a Bush voter over at Tim Keller's church, how he felt going to Tim Keller's church and being a Bush voter full of Democrats that treated him like an N-word because he voted the wrong way? They only care about the racial issue because that's what culture told them to care about. It's not actually transcendent and about people who are actual outsiders. It's not about actual outsiders or how a black person feels. That's what I mean by it's all politics. It is all fake Democrat who are worse racists. They don't care. And they bring it into the church. Because do you really care about how does an outsider feel at this church? The only outsider they'll ever recognize is a black person in a white church. Why don't they recognize a MAGA guy in a MAGA hat over at Tim Keller's church, getting sneers and jeers? How does he feel? Well, we don't care. We hope you feel like an outsider. Maybe you shouldn't wear that hat to church so much. Like the equivalent of a white church going, maybe black people shouldn't come here if you feel so uncomfortable. They don't care about the outsider. They don't care about minorities. They don't care about lived experience. They don't care. They don't even have the empathy they claim. It's not there. I've seen it over and over again. They don't care. That's my conclusion.
Well, that is a good note to end on. We've been going for almost 2 hours, but I think that really does kind of summarize up. Gavin again was talking about people making responses to these sorts of things, and this is something that you and I wanted to talk about for quite some time.
I do like ending on this face, though, him pretending to be concerned. That's a great ending of this show. I want a T-shirt of that.
Well, maybe he is. Maybe we can set something up where you and Gavin could sit down. I can mediate. I can be the moderator.
Yeah, not on camera. I'll do it one-on-one with him. I'll try and love him back into the kingdom.
That would be an interesting discussion. Yes, even if it wasn't recorded. So seriously, maybe something like that could take place. But that is my honest thoughts about the third way. It is just. It's honestly shocking, given where we're at right now, that there are people that are still trying to defend this. And again, like you pointed out, I don't want to impugn motives and stuff like that, but man, it just like every one of these individuals that I hear talk about this, there's always just this sort of undertone of passive aggressive scolding, hall monitor. It's like the third wayists see themselves as like the hall monitor of the church, where it's like they're going to scold you, if you're on the right. If it's on the left, it's like, well, yeah, we're going to say like, God created, marriage between a man and a woman. That's their scolding of the left.
Miles,
It's just
it
stating,
never acts outside of a feminist culture. It never counters one.
Yeah.
That's why the whole thing is just feminist projection. And then they have tried to baptize it. And now he's mad that it doesn't work anymore. And whether if we win this argument or not, Miles, the good news is third wayism is dead.